My name's Todd, and not only as a citizen of Richmond, I was also a delegate for the State Republican Convention, and also a roughneck in the oil fields of Texas, and an engineer for J. Ray McDermott for the pipelines of the oil field. So I know it's pretty busy and it's a booming business, and there's a lot going on offshore already. And with having two oil men in office, I can understand why we're kind of in an oil crisis that we're in, and why they're wanting to get access to more drilling offshore before they're out of office. With Chris talking about the environmental aspect of it, back in 1989 with the Valdez accident, and they was fined $2.5 billion, and the court dropped it down to $507 million, and they, back in June, I guess they paid $219 million of that. But in 2007, they had record profits of $40 billion. And I know you're concerned about refineries and having more refineries in America. Why not encourage these companies that is having these record profits, build more refineries to produce the oil? And then one more part to the question was, I would like to know how you feel about Congressman Sustacks supports the responsible use of domestic resources that's already in effect, which is House Resolution, this is hard to read, it's small print, 6515.
Number one, thank you for the question. Thanks for coming. I don't know the Sustacks Bill specifically that you're referring to. I'd be happy to get you a letter to give you our position on it. But I'm just not good at memorizing numbers of what bills are. But let me speak to your first point, which I was trying to think if I can remember that. What was the first point again? Just give me a quick reminder.
The record profits.
Oh, record profits. Yeah, let me talk about that, because I think one of the things you said was, how can we encourage oil companies to build more refineries? Well, many people on the left want to rescind the tax incentives that were passed. They call them tax breaks for big oil. The tax breaks for big oil were given to them to encourage them to build more refineries, and it's starting to happen. And I think the way we can continue to encourage them to build more refineries is give them more incentives. Just as this gentleman over here wants to build a wind farm, you create incentives in the tax code, and maybe some grant programs that encourage the formation of capital around that kind of a program. In terms of record profits, I got to be honest with you. I'm a free market conservative. I think corporations in America exist to make profit. I'm no apologist for big oil. I'm no apologist for big supermarkets. I'm no apologist for big auto. I am an apologist, though, for their millions of shareholders in this country who have the right to get the largest return on their stock investment as they possibly can. And while there's a lot of shorthand criticism about the profits oil companies have been making, I think it's always worth noting that, pick Exxon or some other company, millions of Americans have Exxon stock in their 401ks and their pension plans, and they represent a very significant part of why those plans have been successful. So, so that's the first thing, is to recognize when a publicly traded corporation does well, that means the public that owns those shares does well, and that's oftentimes left out of that conversation. The other part of it is I do recognize that, at least as I've studied it, some of those record profits have to do with the aggressive increase in the cost of oil per barrel that happened from the time the oil companies purchased the oil at the spigot to the time that they sold it to be refined into gasoline. And some people call that that's a paper profit. It certainly is a profit, but it represents that when I buy corn when it's selling at this price, and then I sell it when it's selling at this price, I made a big profit on that. And some of those profits are just a function of the fact that global demand and the lack of any additional American supply has resulted in oil per barrel almost doubling in the last year and a half. And I just, again, I always want to remember that millions and tens of millions of Americans hold shares in these companies, and I really believe that there's a temptation, particularly in Washington, to find somebody to blame other than Washington. And it's the speculators, it's the big oil companies. It could be the fact that Washington, D.C. has refused to give the American people more access to American oil for decades. It could be that global demand with the expansion of China and India has grown exponentially, and we haven't been taking advantage of the vast domestic resources that we have. That would be my response to that. Lon?